Welcome to Push Go, a podcast powered by Plum, where we highlight the defining moments that impact how we live and work. Today, I'm joined by Blake Benz. Blake was a former high school teacher who became a leadership training facilitator and executive coach in Northwest Arkansas. Today, you'll hear how his passion for people and itch for leadership followed him through his life and eventually led him to launch Good Advice, a business that helps companies scale in simple steps. Blake, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
It's great to have a podcast person on the podcast.
I know. This feels like, we're going to have a little bit of a bro time because we're fellow podcasters.
This would be fantastic. I'm a little bit intimidated, though, because you are the expert in the room.
Outside of the room, not so much, but
inside
maybe in the room,
you're
for
totally
sure.
The expert there. Can't wait to hear about your story. So let's start out a bit. So are you a native Arkansan? Are you from this area?
Yeah, I grew up in Little Rock.
Okay.
And so born and raised Little Rock, went to college in Fayetteville at the U of A, moved away, came back, saw the amazingness that is NWA and never wanted to leave. And so we've lived here, my wife and I, since 2013, actually.
Okay, so wow.
Yeah, I guess, about a decade next year.
It's hard to believe, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gone by very fast, actually.
Kind of crazy. So we were talking earlier, we have a mutual friend, and I didn't realize it, that you had also spent time at Teach for America.
Yes.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, it takes a quality person to do Teach for America. But tell me a little bit about that. Was that always kind of a dream of yours, or were you going to go into education and this was kind of a logical step for you? How did you end up in doing that work?
I don't really know how I did.
Okay.
So I grew up watching ER on Thursday nights.
Yes.
And I went to college and I was like, what do I want to do? And I was like, I'm going to be a doctor.
Of course you do.
This show's awesome. And then found out very quickly, actually I shadowed a doctor for a week and was like, I hate this. Like, I remember I was in like the surgery room and he was like, hey, it's okay if you get nauseous. And I was like, I'll be fine. I won't get sick.
Yeah.
And like literally within like 3 or 4 minutes, I was sick and wasn't interested in medicine at all. And so basically it was like my senior year of college. And I thought, what am I going to do? So a recruiter from Teach for America called me because I was doing something on the side called Young Life, which is like a national mentoring Christian organization. And Teach for America actually recruits out of Young Life.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Because it's people who are great around younger people, are great mentors, things like that. So I had a recruiter call me and ask me to apply. And I responded with, well, I'm graduating college. I don't think I can really go do like a 2-year like volunteer thing. Like I thought it was like a
no. Yeah. This is a real job.
Yeah. She was like, well, you're going to get paid. You're going to be an actual teacher. And I was like, yeah. So I didn't really know what to do. And so I was like, yeah, I'll apply. So I applied and long story short, got accepted and was a high school teacher.
But at that point in time, you did not have a teaching certificate. It really was, you were trying to figure out with your career what you were going to do.
Yeah.
So you had a couple of years, working hard, giving back. During that time, how were you processing life? Were you thinking, okay, this could be a career, or it truly was, this is a 2-year stint. I'm going to learn from this, grow from this. I'm not going to do this long term.
So I don't know if Teach for America does this intentionally, but there's a lot of like conversation around being a lifelong educator versus like being a drive-by educator. Okay. And it was important to me, and they do this for a good reason, in that the whole purpose of Teach for America, whether you stay in teaching or not, is that you become a lifelong advocate for public education.
Okay.
And so, because you get into the system, you see what education is like, and hopefully when you get out of it or you move on or do something else, you use your connections, your leadership, whatever, to try to influence it in a positive way. So I didn't really know where I was going to go with it, but when I was in it, I would say every day was different. There were days that I was like, I love teaching. I love my kids. I could do this the rest of my life. And then I had days where it was literally like, I don't know if I'm going to survive this. It was that rough for sure.
Now, were you in an area where you had friends? You weren't married then, were you?
Wasn't married.
So this is single guy Blake out in
Mississippi, the Mississippi Delta.
Okay.
And I had to get up at 4 a.m. to drive to my school.
So you weren't living next door to the school? You didn't have like an apartment next door?
No, I was about an hour away. And
Okay.
so I had to get up, eat breakfast, get to school. And we actually would take a bus to the school. And eventually I got a car and would drive because it would save me about an hour and a half. But yeah, no friends actually. It was actually, as someone who's very sociable, I had helped start Young Life at University of Arkansas in 2007. And I had built this really, just really great network, like people to hang out with, spend time with, and just keep me sharp. And then suddenly I was in another state, didn't know anybody, had no friends. I taught 7th or 8th grade, and I thought, okay, this probably isn't really my friends group, I would guess.
Right.
And yeah, it was tough. It was a tough time in Houston or in Mississippi.
Wow. So Mississippi, then you said from there you went to Houston. So you kind of transitioned from as rural as you can get to inner city.
Yes.
So what was that like?
It was an adjustment because the school I was at previously was really, I would say, undermanaged in that it was very much there was a lot more trust given and just assumption that you were doing the right thing. The school I moved to was a school that was on the brink of being shut down permanently. And it was one of 4 schools that had been selected in Houston out of all these other schools for like this intense turnaround program. So it was very rigid. It was
all eyes on you.
Absolutely. Okay. In fact, funny enough, the first year that I was there, I had a co-teacher who both of us, we were getting our teaching licensure. They do this thing called a probationary license where you teach for a year and then in the evenings you're going to basically get your certification.
Okay.
So by the year you have to have your license. So we're getting our probationary license, but both of us are like, we have no idea what we're doing. There was 40 different languages spoken at my school. English was not the majority language. And so not only am I learning how to teach, I'm also just trying to figure out how to communicate effectively. But so it was a very rigid environment. And in fact, that first year, my co-teacher or the teacher next door actually got fired.
Wow.
Because he and I went to a meeting where we were like, we're lost. Like, we don't know what we're doing.
And you admitted it.
Yeah. I mean, and here I am. And it's interesting. I was very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and very trusting and very naive, unfortunately, in the sense of, like your bosses, like my whole life, I had only been exposed to bosses who were like your biggest fans.
Yeah.
And like wanted to see you successful, wanted to lift you up.
Okay.
So we go to this meeting to basically be like, we need help. He goes first and basically is just like, I'm totally underwater. And it's the principal and this HR person who's there too, which already is weird because I'm thinking, why is this person here? And they're like, okay, yeah, well, we'll definitely take feedback on what you're saying. We'll get back to you. And there was just something in me that was like,
don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. Exactly. And so they go to me, Blake, do you feel the same way? And I was like, I think I can figure it out. I think I got it.
No way. Your friend looks at you like
he was like,
what did you do?
What are you doing? And so he got let go. I think that week, maybe even that day. But in education, you can't fire immediately. So he got shuffled off to like an admin room basically until he was let go. And very different environment. And it really kind of shaped my passion for leadership, culture, management, because it was such a intense environment for sure.
So you've got that 2 years, and you've got to figure out what you're going to do next. And so you didn't jump right back into education, did you?
Well, so I was there for 3 years.
3 years.
I got my master's, and I was trying to think about what do I want to do next.
Right.
And there's a lot of attrition that happens in the education system. We had a massive teacher shortage. And so I was thinking about my experience, and I thought, I really want to be someone who could maybe mentor new teachers. Or in fact, what I was thinking about was I felt like the school had been so mismanaged that I thought maybe what would it look like to go like teach admin people how to be better bosses.
Okay.
So I moved up to the U of A to do this doctoral program and basically try to maybe get like some kind of doctoral, be a superintendent maybe, or something like that. And all that to say, I was dating my wife long distance. We had been camp counselors together. She was moving here coincidentally. And so it just kind of made sense to go to school here again. And so I left after my 3rd year and came up to NWA again.
Did you start and finish your PhD?
Never finished it. I
would say, so
I shouldn't say never because
never.
I'm still enrolled.
Okay.
And every semester I'm what's called ABD, which is all but dissertation. So the coursework's done, the final tests are done. It's this dissertation I need to write.
And so why haven't we written our dissertation? Because you're busy, I know. But
if
really,
my advisor watches this, he's going to be like, "Yeah, why haven't you?" I think the other day he was
I
like,
want to call you doctor.
Yeah, I mean, well, I've never really cared about titles, so that doesn't really matter to me. But my advisor was like, "Yeah, I was looking at a list of like our longest standing students, and you are at the top."
That's not the record you want.
Yeah. Well, I think it's been probably at this point, probably about 5 years, maybe 6 years.
Okay.
Because as I was finishing it, I started working at a leadership consulting company. And so thinking I could do both easily, I was a full-time student. I jumped into that job, and then suddenly my time for it just evaporated. And I just haven't, I guess I've just haven't given the attention I need to yet.
Well, that's okay. Listen, so I think about from college throughout the leadership piece, you're in the school system. Even while you're teaching, you're still thinking, how do I develop leaders? So you started to have kind of a theme or a thread or this reel that's running, leadership. You come back up here, obviously you're getting a PhD, but you're working while that's going on. So what type of work were you doing?
I was a server at Chewy's.
Nice.
One of the best jobs I've ever had.
Okay.
Hands down. I love people. I mean, there's something that just comes alive when I can go up to a table. Honestly, if I could live the life financially that I would want to live and get that from Chewy's, I would probably still be a server.
I love that. That is an advertisement for Chewy's. The whole time you were living the dream job, though, were you thinking, I could change leadership, I could help with management? Was that still kind of a thread? Like I can help Chewy's do this better?
I knew it was temporary, and I was very blessed at Chewy's to get a lot of get opportunities to mentor some new servers and just kind of use that leadership itch that I had. But I knew it was temporary. I knew I wasn't going to do it long term. So I wasn't necessarily even thinking, how do I make these two worlds collide? It was almost sort of like a delayed, like I know I'm going to get back to this. And so when the position opened up at the leadership consulting firm, it was just like a no-brainer for me.
So how'd you hear about that? So you go from getting a PhD, working at Chewy's, living the
Not
dream
getting
job,
it, but hoping to get it.
hoping to get a PhD, living the dream job, working at Chewy's. You're married now.
Yes.
Have a child yet?
No kids yet.
No kids yet. And all of a sudden, you get a call. Did you meet someone?
Well,
how did you end up in?
It's a great question because when which speaking of having kids, I made sure to wait to have my first kid until I was broke and an entrepreneur.
Nice. Okay, so you waited a while.
Yeah, I waited a while for that. So it's funny. So when I had moved back up, Young Life got back in touch with me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to come and handle all of our leadership development for our volunteers?"
Okay.
Because they knew me, they knew my history with the place. Well, one of the people who was a staff person was basically like, "Hey, there's this job opening up in Siloam Springs," which is where he lived.
Okay.
They're looking for someone who has a teaching background and a leadership background. You should apply for it. And I was like, well, and I didn't know this was like at John Brown University. And so I was like, well, I mean, is this like a mom and pop? Like what is this really? And he was like, no, it's a real job. So basically I reached out to the person running it, Chuck Hyde, and he said, yeah, let's get coffee, come see the place. And it honestly, I thought Chewy's was the dream job because I got to interact with people. Right. This was literally the dream job. This thing that I was passionate about, which was basically helping people not hate Mondays anymore, like where you wake up and you're excited about your job, you're excited about the people you work with. This is all how he described the business. And so I was pretty much like, yeah, I will do whatever it takes.
Now, did you coin that? I wanted to help people not hate Mondays.
I don't know if I coined it.
If that's not yours, that's very tweetable. That's legit.
Well, I don't know if we could say it's tweetable anymore. We'll have to see how Twitter fares.
It's Instable. It's something.
Yeah,
but
something.
It's from a social media standpoint.
Yeah,
the number of people that would resonate with that hashtag, regardless of the medium.
Yeah.
I want to come alongside and help people not hate Mondays anymore is really interesting.
Well, it was something that I would say because working in the school system, there would be this thing that my fellow co-teachers and I we would text on Sunday nights. We had to be up at probably 4:30 or 5 in the morning, because also part of the initiative with these 4 schools was the school day was longer. So I think it was like 7 to 4:30 or 7 to 5 or something. And so we would stay up late on Sunday nights because we so badly, and here's what's ironic, had nothing to do with the students. Students were amazing, but because it was so toxic and mismanaged, it was a real pain that Monday morning. And so the concept that I resonated with was, life is so short. How crazy is it that we will delay Monday as long as possible because we are so dissatisfied with that position?
Yeah.
Right. And so talking with Chuck, he was basically like, yeah, like we work with companies to basically have a more empowering culture and for people to enjoy their jobs again. And so I pretty much jumped headfirst into that, had no business experience, had no formal leadership training, and in hindsight was probably very much, given a chance that I maybe didn't deserve to come in and work in that business.
So that was that the Soderquist Center at that time?
Yeah, that was Soderquist Leadership, and then they rebranded to Milestone Leadership because they downsized. And they're still Milestone leadership today, and still making an awesome leadership impact all over NWA.
So you're in a dream job. It's not Chewy's, but in the working with Milestone, you're in the dream
just
job.
beneath Chewy's.
So what kept you from having a 5, 10, 20-year career in the dream job, helping others? Because we talk about defining moments. I mean, you're in this moment. You're talking to your wife, your friends. You're like, you're happier than you've ever been.
Yeah.
Was there an itch? Was there an opportunity? What helped you, or what allowed you to even think about doing something different? Because you're in a zone now.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, there was a couple of things. So they went through a downsizing when Don Soderquist died, and people that I had sort of come on board with were moving on. And so suddenly I felt like a lot of the connections I had built, it felt very solo from that point on, even though it was still a small team. But also in having conversations with people in their businesses and like managing their capacity, their leadership well, their people well, I discovered this other itch I had, which was for how businesses operate. Because you would work with a company where, they're managing their people, but despite whatever they're doing with their people, there's this whole other element of like actually running the business that's actually very entwined with how they manage their people that I just kind of became curious about. And the more I thought about it, the more I got excited about, I enjoyed like the leadership side of it. I enjoyed the mentorship. I enjoyed the facilitation of it. But I found myself eager to learn more about the business side. So I was actually I wasn't a sales guy. I was asking Chuck, hey, can I go to the sales meetings? Like, can I go and just learn this?
Just to experience it.
I was just intrigued. Okay. And it just was, I don't know, something about it just made sense to me. I was like, this is something, and I found myself thinking I could do this. Like I could do this and I could sell and I could work with businesses. And so after, I guess it was about 3 or 4 years, actually what happened was my boss, her dream was to go run a Chick-fil-A store, and she got chosen to do that.
Which is really hard.
Very hard to do. She was an amazing boss, so it's no surprise that she got chosen. So she got chosen, and she was really the person I was closest to. And for me, it kind of felt like a sign from God of like, you've really been thinking about this. You've really been craving it. I think it's time to try this out.
Okay. Now, do you have people on each shoulder, one saying, stable, don't do it, you've got a career going, don't do this? And do you have someone on the other shoulder saying, jump, push, go, like get out, make this happen? So who's speaking to you?
Yeah, it's a great question because, I look back, my wife has always been the biggest advocate without like any strings attached.
Okay.
In the sense of like, okay, yeah, let's do it.
She is pro Blake.
She's pro Blake. And I had very close friends who I told them what I was going to do. I had one very close person who I said what I was going to go do, and they go, oh, Blake, you can't do this. Like, seriously, you can't do this. Okay. We weren't pregnant yet or anything, but they were just like, for your future, what you're trying to do, want to raise a family, this is the wrong decision. And I actually had people who, I had a really great career path for me at this business that would have looked really lucrative on a resume. And ultimately, I just knew, I don't know if it's like stereotypical millennialism or what, but I knew I had to feel like I was doing what I was called to do. And leadership is integral to who I am, but this other business side is something else that I really wanted to lean into.
Okay, so we talked about leaning in our world was about push and go. Did you have your business plan? Was it all mapped out? Everything was perfect. So when you finally decided to leave Milestone, it was all in front of you and you had clients ready to go.
I wish that's what happened.
So that's, I thought that's how all entrepreneurship worked. It was all laid out in front of you and you just started it and you started making money day one.
It's funny. I was actually just talking about this today. So what's interesting, it's kind of like how you think it's going to go and how it actually goes.
Yeah.
And so I had sold at Milestone, I had sold about $250,000 in revenue. And so I was doing the math thinking if I sold a fifth of that, that's a year's salary easy. And, I had so much like personal ego in that, like, oh,
how hard can that be?
Yeah, it's so easy. Knew nothing. I didn't realize how strong this brand was. And I totally overcompensated in my mind how qualifying I was like as a salesperson. Well, so I quit the business. It was October 1st. I remember the day because it was also the day that my wife let me know she was pregnant. And so
before or after you said you already resigned?
I had already resigned. The job was over. I was done.
That's so good.
It was a Monday, was October 1st, I think one day or a Tuesday. And so I had paid a third party to book calls for me and thinking, and we had about probably $10,000 or $15,000 in cash that we basically were like, yeah, let's put this into the business.
That's your seed money.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I thought, I'm good with money. I can use this well. Well, my first year, I blew through all of that. I spent it on big mistakes that I shouldn't have spent it on, advertising that I wasn't ready for, things like that. But I remember that first day, I got an email from this third-party service that the email read, it was an automated email. It said, you have no calls booked for today, which I thought, okay, well, yeah, I mean, probably
that's day one.
People probably don't know yet that I'm doing this.
Especially how good you are.
Exactly, right. And so day two, it'll surely, pop up. It was about 6 months before I got my first customer. And it was a really challenging 6 months because now I had left this job that was paying me well. We had also just bought a house also. So I have this baby that's on the way. And, and then also what was crazy was, I don't know if you've heard the expression of how entrepreneurs will do anything to leave their 40-hour job so they can work 80 hours as an entrepreneur. Well, so my wife ended up miscarrying and was having just a really difficult time. I'm working all these crazy hours. It was chaos. It was pure chaos. And oddly enough, though, my wife through all of that was like, keep going, keep doing this. And I'd kind of burned my bridges anyway, so there really wasn't any going back.
Wow.
So I stuck to it.
So let me read it. I've got a little post here. A certain Blake posted something today on LinkedIn. I thought it was just so relevant here. Yeah. You had a person who wanted to be an entrepreneur, and you asked the question, why?
Yeah.
And this person said, it'd be great. I could sleep in as late as I wanted. I wouldn't have a boss to tell me what to do. It sounds awesome. But you said this, and I love this quote. You said, the journey of running a business can be a bit lonely. And truth be told, you may not see success in your first year. Mm-hmm. That's a relevant. I mean, this was posted a couple hours ago this morning. Yeah. So let's drop anchor on that a bit. You're in here. You've got this dream. You've pushed go. This defining moment. That miscarriage happened. All this stuff happened in your life. Your savings are gone. The journey can be a bit lonely, and truth be told, you may not see success in your first year. Speak to us about being lonely, that loneliness, and what it took to get to that first customer. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first customer felt sorry for me, and but it was a 4-figure deal that, I mean, it was enough to cover my bills for the foreseeable future. And in hindsight, I can only assume he felt bad for me. Because he also paid in full up front. And even though it was a chaotic contract, he was like, you're great. It's awesome. So I don't know the answer to how I got that first customer other than just, providence from God. But yeah, I think what's interesting is, and again, this is me as a sociable person, but I think even if you're not a very sociable person, you know, we're a society built on connectiveness. You know, think of all the social media platforms, you know, and you go to work, and in many cases you spend more time at work than you do with your own family. Well, suddenly I went to this position where I wasn't speaking to really anybody. My friends didn't understand what I was doing. Some of my friends actively thought I was like ruining my life. And it was like, you need to get back to your 9-to-5 job. You need to provide for your family, you know.
What year is this, by the way?
This is 2018.
Okay. All right.
So 4 years ago, because we just did our 4-year anniversary for the business.
So the lonely, again, you're on your own. You're a solopreneur. You're an entrepreneur.
Yep.
You're out there by yourself. People are asking all the questions. They don't understand your life.
And they don't understand what I'm doing either.
So other than your wife who said, I love Blake.
Yeah.
Who's pouring into you, or where are you reaching out to and getting some engagement that's still encouraging you?
Yeah.
Because it is lonely.
Yeah.
So where are you finding that?
Randy Wilburn, who runs the I Am Northwest Arkansas podcast.
Okay.
He's actually the guy who told me to start the Good Advice podcast.
Wow.
So Randy I knew him through my church and instantly took to him. I mean, he has just a natural charisma. He's a natural mentor. And I'd actually, through my last business, had hired him to come do some speaking for some events we were doing. So we had stayed engaged.
Yeah.
And basically when I started my business, I remember calling him and being like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm totally lost. I'm making no money. And Randy is a lifelong entrepreneur and was basically like, yeah, you got to just keep at it, man. And he said, you know, for the days you have nothing to do, you should record a podcast episode. So there was a lot of podcasts in those early days.
No, I mean,
but
so stay in the downtime, stay productive.
Right. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah. There was never a day where it was like, let's watch movies because I have nothing to do. But it was like, how can we at least create traction where there is none? And I'm very grateful for his advice because, I mean, you wouldn't have the Good Advice podcast, 300 plus episodes without that encouragement. And he was definitely somebody who I called a number of times being like, hey, like, I don't know, like cash flow. I had no concept of cash flow. So, hey, Randy, I have all these bills due in the next 14 days, but my next payment doesn't come in for 30 days. What do I do? And so he really helped me with sort of like the mechanical side of running a business, and is also just a deep encourager. I mean, I never, ever from Randy ever got any kind of comment that was like, you sure you should be doing this? It takes a different person, I think, to understand entrepreneurship, and he definitely does.
Yeah. So you're 6 months in, you've got some encouragement coming in, you're working through things. We all get in rhythms, and so you're finally in your week 1 rhythm. The guy paid you, not sure why, but you made it through.
Yep.
How soon was it before you saw the next client where you said, you know, I can see how cash flow is going to come in. Mm-hmm. I can see that I can make this happen.
Yeah, it was actually pretty soon. I don't quite remember who my second customer was, but I remember there was a season from like the 6-month mark to around maybe the 14 or 15-month mark.
Okay.
Where I was like, it was like sale after sale, where I was like, wow, like this, it was validation. Like this is something that could work. And then around that time period, not only was my daughter born, we had COVID happen as well. Wow. Which I had saved enough money to take 3 months off, and including contracts that were going to be fulfilled in the next few months. And the day my daughter was born was the same day that I remember I had Arkansas Children's as a customer, and I got an email from them. I'm in the maternity ward, like post-delivery room, and just seeing my daughter for the first time. Well, my phone dings, and I get this email from ACH that's basically like, hey, we are not canceling, but putting everything on hold for the foreseeable future. Yeah. And so I got that email. I got another email. I got a third email, all the same message from different customers.
Everyone say, put it on hold.
Exactly.
Not because of you, but there's a reality.
Right. These were like sort of like boilerplate, like generic emails. And immediately I began to panic. And it was the first time that I actually wondered, is this going to be the end of the business? Like, do I need to go find another job? And so it was like many entrepreneurs, it was a very scary and chaotic time. And it almost feels like it forced me to reset momentum a bit for the business.
Yeah, but I love that that concept earlier. I didn't sit around and watch movies. I'm saying pretty productive. And even during COVID, I mean, COVID is there, and you don't want to waste COVID. My wife is a breast cancer survivor, and there's a famous blog post that's written about don't wasting your cancer. It's like it's there. You can either ignore it, you can be sad about it, or you can be really productive and use this time that God has given you during this space. And for many people during COVID, they didn't do that. It's like, well, I guess I do need to find something different, but you didn't, because you had the podcast, you had other things. So speak to that time that you had and how you're going to be productive, because you had to see your way out of this, because you're getting the emails that are dinging, delay. And my assumption would be you're also not getting 20 new phone calls. Hey, let's talk about a deal.
None. Yeah.
So during that time, how were you productive? Well, what did you do to put yourself in position that when you came out of this, you had some momentum?
There's a few things that happened. One, I had done like a little bit of a speaking tour on remote work, coincidentally,
before it was cool,
right before COVID. And so I had some customers who they're like, "You're the remote work guy, right?" And I was like, "Yeah, I did a random, 45-minute talk on it." So I got a little bit of like intermediate cash flow from that.
Okay.
But what was interesting was I had one customer who I kept through COVID. It was a title company that was doing extremely well during COVID. And I was privileged to be able to sit in on more personal meetings where we were going through their books. And I was seeing how their revenue was up 35% throughout 2020. And coming out of that conversation, it struck me that while everyone, everything's on fire for everyone, there's a narrow band of people who are staying hungry, who are looking for opportunities, and who are making it happen. And so for me, that's really what I attached myself to was, businesses are rocked right now, but there are still opportunities if you're willing to find them. And so for me personally, I did a lot of like long game content. So I did a lot of content on managing your employees through COVID and thinking about your team after COVID, thinking about your business. How do you help your business survive post-COVID? Now, at the time, I was thinking this was like a 1 year.
So did everyone else.
Yeah, I had no idea this would be such delayed gratification, but I had some cash saved up, and I basically burned through that in 2020 with the assumption that the stuff that I was working on would pay off in 2021. And it actually did. It slowly did, but it's definitely been in this last year that I feel a lot like that first bout of momentum where I'm like, oh my gosh, this could work. Like now hopefully I feel that way 2 or 3 years from now.
But let's speak that where you are today, because that's a great segue into the Good Advice podcast. Okay. Because that 2 or 3 years of amazing content. You said how many podcasts today already?
We have numbered over 300 published. The actual number is probably 330 or 340.
But at that 300, you think about just a wealth of knowledge. Again, you could have ignored things for a year or so and be at number 30 right now. But it is amazing, this database of great podcasts that are out there. What does business look like today? So as people are engaging with you, obviously there's a podcast, people can listen and engage. But if someone was saying, but what does Blake do? Is he just a podcast guy? You're more than that. Yeah. So speak a little bit about what you're doing today, and because we've kind of built up to this point where you are a leadership, coaching, small business guy.
Right.
But give me better words to explain to folks the work that you do today.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because I think my mom would still be like, so what do you do exactly? Yeah. Or you can always tell like the friends who like still don't really know. You're
the podcast guy.
Yeah. Well, we talked about Garrett Peters, who they do Duncan and Stone. And he talked about how when he gets around family, sometimes they're like, "You're still doing that like paper thing again?"
Yeah. And
he's like, "Yeah, it's a legitimate business." But
and I do the app thing. You still don't you do that app thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rick, show them that app thing. Yeah. Don't you like give people money or something? I mean, I have no clue what I do.
Yeah. So the business, there's sort of two avenues to it. So there's the podcast, which is it's equal parts passion and business, in that I love what I get to talk about. I love talking about management, leadership. It's personal to me, but then also like the business side of it. And that's usually mostly around turning customers into raving fans. So what I'm doing today with Good Advice is essentially we're working with small business owners who for them, it's probably started as like a hobby, or it was something that they were doing on the side, but it's grown to the point of it's a full-time gig, but they've never run a business before. So how do I run a business effectively? What kind of system do I need to use to run this easier, where I'm not working 80-hour weeks, to make me more money, where I feel like I've totally plateaued, and to turn my customers that are one-time customers into those repeat buyers who love your brand? So Good Advice, we offer that system. We come in and we help the business to turn that on and implement it effectively so that they can actually, this all came back to, you don't want to hate Mondays.
Right.
I think entrepreneurship is a beautiful thing, and I don't want people to literally hate their job more, hate their life more because they are an entrepreneur, because it is a tough road. So.
Well, listen, you've been an inspiration to me as I've listened to the podcast. We've had some engagement as well. But it's not fair to just be a Rick and Blake conversation here. So if you've got a few thousand people that would love to have a virtual coffee or engage you, obviously they can listen to the podcast, but tell folks, how do they tune into the podcast? And more importantly, if they really want to banter a little bit, engage you about business and what it looks like to be successful and possibly be that repeat client one day, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'll give a few opportunities. So the podcast is the easiest way to engage with the content, and you can just go to podfollow.com/goodadvice, which will literally pull up the podcast on whatever platform that you prefer to use. So there's that. I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's probably the easiest way to speak to me. And I'm an open book. I actually do have people who they will DM me on LinkedIn and say, hey, this is what I'm going on. I actually had a woman who reached out and said, hey, I need career advice. Like, would you be willing to get a cup of coffee with me? And I was like, let's do it. So I just try to always be accessible and available. So you can reach out via social media. And then also my email, blake@goodadvicecoaching.com, is a great way to reach out to me.
Blake@goodadvicecoaching.com. I love that. Blake, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Push Go, a podcast highlighting the defining moments that impact how we live and work. It was fantastic having Blake on the show today. If you like what you heard, you can find more stories just like this on listen.plumshop.com. And hey, we wouldn't be mad if you left us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Now, new episodes, they drop every Wednesday. And if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe. Now, we have a quick PS, a Plum Spotlight, a weekly segment where I give you a sneak peek at what we've been up to at Plum. Now, we just rolled out a really cool repeat feature in the Plum Marketplace that's going to save you time by reactivating projects you've already done in the past. You simply click on the repeat button, and then you can skip re-entering data and details that you've already provided. And then you can relaunch your project in minutes. It's seriously that simple. You can use the code PUSHGO, that's PUSHGO, and check out for $100 off your next project.